Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Kerry Jr. II. Today on the show, Oakland County leaders are under scrutiny. We'll unpack what sparked the controversy and what it reveals about who holds influence in the county.
Plus, we'll hear from Ken Burns about his newest documentary and why he believes the revolution still echoes today.
We'll also look at how colonial systems shaped Detroit's early history and how those systems linger now.
And later in the program, something lighter, a new Detroit crossword book that celebrates the city one clue at a time. Stories
of oversight, of origins, and of the moments that define our community. This is the Metro.
We begin in Oakland County, where controversy among local leaders is brewing. A Detroit Free Press investigation found trouble there. 2 leaders resigned. 2 others were suspended. It happened after a company owned by a county employee received a county contract. That's the worst case we know so far. There are other matters raising questions about ethics in county government. Multiple county commissioners have voted on proposals or agreements with organizations where they were also employed. They haven't been suspended, nor have they resigned. But this is behavior that would violate laws in neighboring places, like Detroit. The Free Press report spotlights gaps in Oakland County's laws that govern the conduct of its officials and prompted Oakland County Executive Dave Coulter to propose ethics reforms. To break this investigation down, producer Sam Corey spoke with Detroit Free Press investigative reporter Dave Boucher.
Why did you start looking into allegations of unethical and inappropriate behavior happening among Oakland County officials?
So a few months back, we saw reports that 2 members of the Oakland County Board of Commissioners, Democrats, were leaving the Democratic caucus. It's a little bit odd in a community where the Democrats control the majority on this elected commission for 2 members to leave that. So we called around and we read their statements, and they seemed to be suggesting that there were issues. So we talked to them, we talked to some other people, and pretty quickly we thought that there was a fair amount of smoke and started to dig a little bit deeper after that.
You found that there were some issues pertaining to the conduct of Oakland County officials and commissioners in particular. Before we discuss the conduct, let's first define the role of commissioners. What do they do?
So at the county level, these positions are technically part-time jobs. And the concept here is that they are stewarding the county government, which in Metro Detroit counties is a big deal. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars. Like, these decisions tend to include quite a bit of money. At the county level, frequently decisions feel routine as the county needs to accept federal money for county initiatives, or the county needs to pass federal or state money onto local municipalities. So frequently in Oakland County, that's voting on something to help with roads in Royal Oak or to help with a sewer issue in Ferndale, something like that. These are, again, though, very important issues for the people in those municipalities, and also when the county sets countywide policy on anything from how to account for feeding people who might not be able to get access to food during a crisis, or about how the county responds to the pandemic. Like, they set pretty important standards and policies for quite a few people, again, in the Metro Detroit community.
So even if people don't see them, they are providing money, resources, instructions to local nonprofits, local agencies that then serve, I guess, respective communities. Let's talk about the conduct in Oakland County, beginning with the Board of Commissioners Chairman Dave Woodward. What did you find?
We were able to show, as did others, that Chairman Woodward is a paid consultant for Sheetz, which is a gas station convenience store empire looking to expand in Michigan. And so they are relying on people like Chairman Woodward to meet with local municipal leaders all over Oakland County to talk about Sheetz and to make introductions. And in this case, Chairman Woodward appears to have talked to people in Royal Oak who are on the city commission, and he helped run not only the mayor's campaign, but the campaign of all 6 other members of the Royal Oak City Commission.
Now, I guess I should note that Commissioner Woodward didn't vote on anything related to his Sheetz company specifically.
That's correct. To the best of our knowledge, there's no business from Sheetz directly before the county.
The implication is, well, they're going to be much kinder to Sheetz. They're going to be much more likely to accept the Sheetz proposal because they got elected through the help of his political campaign firm.
I think you could certainly say that Sheetz doesn't mind that their paid consultant is also the campaign manager for the 7 key elected officials they need to get the zoning changes and the other approval required to get their facility in Royal Oak, especially when there's been a vocal opposition to having one of their stores at the specific location where they proposed it.
It's a potential conflict of interest.
Absolutely. I think that's something that experts told us. They told us that about many things that he engaged in. It's important to note that both Chairman Woodward and the Mayor, Mike Fournier, say that any allegation of conflicts of interest or impropriety are, I think the words they use are ludicrous or absolutely incorrect. They both put out statements that said they've done everything above board, and of course they know each other, but that doesn't inherently present a conflict.
In this case, did anybody violate any rules, any ordinances, any policies at the local, state, or federal level?
That's a really fair question. We at the Free Press are not necessarily the arbiters of who violates some of these policies. We talk to municipal government experts in Michigan and across the country who just kind of look at what elected leaders are supposed to do. And they said, in a vacuum, that many of these actions raise a lot of questions, that they bring up questions about whether or not there is not only a conflict of interest, but the appearance of a conflict of interest. Every expert we talked about the idea of the appearance of impropriety can at times be just as damaging as the impropriety itself.
Even if there's no rule violation itself.
Sure, that's exactly right.
Now I want to turn to the dynamics between Woodward and Oakland County Water Resources Commissioner Jim Nash. What red flags did you find there?
We found many examples of where Chairman Woodward voted on issues related to his political clients, including Commissioner Nash. We found that in addition to Chairman Woodward's work as a paid consultant for Sheetz, he runs a private political consulting business with a couple other people that helps run the campaigns of the mayor of Royal Oak and, in this case, the Water Resources Commissioner. This person, Commissioner Jim Nash, has paid this political company that Chairman Woodward runs $150,000 in recent years. Almost immediately after one of those recent payments, we found that Chairman Woodward voted to give Commissioner Nash and others, as part of a recommendation, a pay raise. It's real money. It's real money going to a political client, and it comes a few relatively shortly after that political client paid him money for his services.
Yeah. And what do Commissioner Nash and Woodward say about this?
Commissioner Nash talked to us at length about this. We really appreciated his candor and chatting through this with us. He, like the others, said he didn't think that it was any sort of conflict. He said he's known Commissioner Woodward and his political consulting colleagues for a long time and thought that they offered strong services and that they helped this campaign. He didn't think that there was any sort of conflict involved here in hiring him and in working with him. He suggested that they were just two separate ideas, that the campaigning was different and then working together in an official capacity either with the Water Department or with the County Commission was separate, as did Chairman Woodward. Chairman Woodward didn't answer many of our specific questions about some of the issues that we found, but he did just in general again say he didn't think that there was any conflict. He felt that everything he was doing was above board and that when it came to voting, he was voting in the best interests of his constituents, not related to any sort of previous private work that he might have done. Now, in theory, let me stress that again. In theory, Chairman Woodward spoke with county lawyers to see if there was a conflict, to get their interpretation about that, and then to come forward and make a decision on whether or not to vote. We've heard that in general, that is something that can happen.
Yeah.
However, the county won't release any sort of ethical guidance they have given to Chairman Woodward or to any other commissioners who might have had perceived conflict because they're citing attorney-client privilege. So if they want to evoke privilege, it is hard for us to know whether or not, as Chairman Woodward said, the guidance was, you're absolutely right, there is no conflict, you can go ahead and vote here, or if the guidance was, yeah, that could be a perceived conflict. We don't know what happened.
You're listening to The Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Sam Corey, speaking with Dave Boucher. He is an investigative reporter with the Detroit Free Press. We are discussing his reporting about Oakland County officials who have engaged in behavior that could be perceived as a conflict of interest, and one case where an official did violate the law. Now, Dave, I want to talk about the case where officials did violate the law. In July, a whistleblower told county officials a company called Zaid Logics received $450,000, a $450,000 county contract, despite the owner also working as a county employee. Now, I guess this is just another example of conflict of interest, and this time clearly violating state law.
In this case, the policy that's in question and what it looks like to be the law that's in question is a member of a public entity, in this case an employee of Oakland County, is directly benefiting from a contract with the county. So again, this is not this person's salary, right? This person runs a company. The company gets a six-figure contract while that person is also an employee at the county. That is, according to the county itself, a violation of county policy. According to the county's lawyers, it appears to be a violation of state law. And it's a violation of this standards of conduct policy, which we talked about earlier. It's the exact same policy that's supposed to apply to Chairman Woodward. Officials in this case say that they don't think that the people involved in this case had read that standards of conduct policy for years, since they had been hired.
You mentioned that the same policy applies to Chairman Woodward. The difference here is that the owner of Zaid Logics made a decision in his role as an elected official that directly fed his own pockets. That is different from what Chairman Woodward did, making decisions on issues and contracts that benefited a company like Sheetz or an individual like Commissioner Jim Nash.
That's correct.
Now, you noted a number of other officials who have voted on issues where there could be a perceived conflict of interest. County Commissioner Angela Powell voted on issues related to Pontiac, while also being a city employee of Pontiac. County Commissioner William Miller is also a political director of a union and voted on the county's contract with that union. There's a recurring theme where officials in this county repeatedly engage in behavior that can be perceived as a conflict of interest.
Part of the problem here is, in Oakland County, the rules are vague at best and limited. There's a one-page standard of conduct policy that is supposed to govern how elected officials and county employees act. It was created in the early 90s. It hasn't been updated since. It doesn't include any sort of teeth for violations. It doesn't explain an investigation process to determine whether or not there was a violation. And it falls far short of what is in place in, say, Wayne County and in Detroit, where the Detroit has a board of ethics. Detroit has an ethics code. The Wayne County has a board of ethics. There's an office of an inspector general. You can debate whether or not these are all effective mechanisms to ensure good governance.
But at least it's there.
At
least there's something.
That's absolutely right. And so for a county the size of Oakland County, one of the largest in the state, with, again, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in question year in and year out, to have a one-page form, that brought up these issues of, well, is there a violation? Is there not? I will say that in the case of Chairman Woodward, no one in a capacity to potentially punish him, which is not very many people, has come out and said, yes, he violated X, Y, and Z policy. Now, we've had some of his fellow commissioners say, we absolutely think an investigation is worthwhile, but the process of even determining officially whether or not he violated the standards of conduct is at best vague. This sort of behavior is occurring, and there's not any sort of really obvious mechanism to publicly push back, to publicly say, well, wait a minute, if you work for the mayor of Pontiac, should you vote on issues related to money going to Pontiac? Or like you said, if you're the political director of a union and have a six-figure contract with that union, should you vote on the county's contract for that union? Now, again, there is the chance that the county's lawyers told these commissioners, nope, you're okay. All of that is in accordance with the county's ethics policies and with state law.
We just don't know because they haven't sent you that information.
That's exactly right. We've asked for it, and there have been suggestions that lawyers might have provided such advice. But if we don't see the advice, it's we're trying to verify these things, right? Like, because we've been told by people involved that they haven't voted on contracts, and then we find evidence that they do, So we want to be able to verify that the lawyers provided this information. Even bigger than that, the question that we've talked a lot about with these ethics experts is, are you living up to what the standard of conduct policy, what the letter of the law is, or are you doing what voters expect you to do? Now, there's a huge difference here, right? Everybody involved says we don't think we violated any policy, but is that meeting the lowest possible bar, or is it living up to the expectations of voters who want a fair, just, transparent government?
Well, have you talked to any voters about this? Have any voters or residents of Oakland County been like, hey, what the heck is happening here?
Sure. We've heard from quite a few readers who have both said, wow, we are surprised at this happening, or wow, we are thankful that you're reporting on this. And we've heard from defenders of Chairman Woodward and from others involved. They say Chairman Woodward is a longtime zealous advocate for Democrats in Michigan and Democrats in Oakland County. And there are voters who say he is doing everything he can to ensure that he is helping advance the policies that Democratic voters want, and so they appreciate his activities there. But we've absolutely heard from people saying some of this stuff just doesn't feel right.
Detroit Free Press reporter Dave Boucher speaking with Sam Corey about how the conduct of Oakland County officials has raised ethical red flags. We'll go deeper into this story next on the Metro. Stay with us. WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. We continue our conversation now about conflicts of interest in Oakland County and what they reveal about accountability and power. Here's producer Sam Corey speaking with Dave Boucher, a reporter with the Detroit Free Press, about how the county could address these issues.
Now, Dave, one of the big threads through your reporting on this is that Oakland County doesn't have an ethics ordinance. So in some ways, there's no violation because there's no ethics ordinance, even if it smells really bad or if there's conflict of interest problems across the board. There's a new proposal for one, but I guess at this point, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but just to clarify this, just to sharpen this, Woodward and other officials, except for the county officials who were working with Zaid Logics, they haven't violated any state or federal law that we know of.
There's been no law enforcement agency or a lawyer who works for the county or anybody like that to say that Chairman Woodward or anyone else has violated the law. I will say that multiple county commissioners want an investigation. They want to see whether or not what the chairman has done has potentially violated something, but that would almost assuredly require a vote of the commission, of which, of course, the chairman is the leader.
Yeah.
And as leader, you get to dictate or have a lot of control over what comes up for a vote and what doesn't.
But could, I guess, state police or state legislators or the attorney general independently start charging and looking into this based on what they know?
Sure. In theory, we have heard in the case of the contract that you mentioned that the Oakland County sheriff in theory could investigate, but needed a criminal referral. And so which means somebody needs to file a report. So a Republican, the top Republican on the Oakland County Commission, went in and filed a criminal referral with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. That doesn't necessarily mean that the sheriff will investigate, but no, it's broadly speaking, the law enforcement agencies that you mentioned have the authority to ask questions whenever they want, and they absolutely could.
Mm-hmm. Oakland County Executive Dave Coulter has said that he wants some ethics reforms. He wants for top officials to report their financial interests and to create a new county government watchdog role. If any of this comes to pass, would this solve any of the problems that you've been reporting on?
Sure. In theory, it could, right? A large part of this is transparency. If the argument from Chairman Woodward and others is, I am doing business on the side, my elected position is a part-time job, and so I need to do other business, and none of that business affects how I vote or any of my public duties, then disclosing where you work can help assuage any of those concerns that voters might have. So disclosing that you work for X, Y, and Z company, and then voters are able to see that X, Y, and Z companies haven't had any business before the county or other business elsewhere, might make them feel better, right? Of course, there's probably going to be people who are upset, but at the very least, it helps voters understand possible motivations for an elected official. And in general, transparency helps people feel better. That's kind of the business we're in as journalists. We try to show people as much as we can. And that's certainly something that, in theory, could help. Another component that Executive Coulter has suggested is creating what he's called an ombudsman's position in the county to kind of be a clearinghouse for complaints, where if you're a county employee or you're an outsider and you want to send in complaints of possible ethical violations by other county employees or by elected officials, you would come to this person, and there'd be an office for that. Right now, the position doesn't exist, and it's part of that opaque process of, if an allegation comes in, what are we supposed to do? Who's supposed to be involved?
But even, if that position did exist, though, part of this story is about relationships and relationships being abused for personal gain. I mean, would it be a concern of yours that the same thing would happen here? You have the ombudsman, but, the ombudsman goes to the Christmas party of Woodward or some other commissioner, and then, they're less likely to, bring up evidence that would potentially hurt or defame or do something against somebody that they like. I guess I wonder what you make of that and who should be in that ombudsman role.
It's tough. It's really tough, right? And as I mentioned before, there's not the exact same position in Detroit, but Detroit has a board of ethics. Detroit has an inspector general.
This is for the city of Detroit.
And those are for the city of Detroit, yep. And so these are positions that can also, in theory, review possible ethical violations. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't note that there are plenty of critics of these watchdog entities in Detroit who feel like they don't go far enough, or they frequently move too slow, or they don't serve the role that they're supposed to. But at least they're there. At least they're doing something. Again, plenty of people who debate the efficacy of these roles. But right now, it doesn't exist at all in Oakland County. And to your point, could it lead to something that doesn't work? Absolutely. But I think what advocates have told me is that any structure can be better than no structure. And again, a lot of this is about assuaging even the appearance of impropriety. Mm-hmm. And if you have a structure in place, it can help some people, not all people, but some people feel a little bit more comfortable that there is at least somebody tasked with ensuring that their elected officials work for them.
You're listening to The Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Sam Corey, speaking with Dave Boucher. He's an investigative reporter with the Detroit Free Press. We are discussing his reporting about Oakland County officials who have engaged in behavior that could be perceived as a conflict of interest in the county's vague guidelines that allow for such behavior. So, Dave, your spotlight is on Oakland County right now, and it has been strongly. How common are these ethical violations in other places, but we just really don't know about them because there's not as much reporting and there's not as much knowledge of what's going on there?
Sure. I think that's a great question, and it's one that we would love to answer as thoroughly as possible. I know that we've gotten tips. We've gotten a lot of tips about other communities, about the idea of somebody, because most of these elected roles are part-time roles, and so many people who are elected also have full-time jobs. So we've gotten tips about people in many communities who are working full-time in a role and then serving part-time as elected official, and that could, in theory, create some sort of conflict. So it's something that we're absolutely reviewing. It certainly could be widespread, and like you said, it comes down to this idea of who's watching, who's going to call them out on it.
I think the idea of the part-time role is an important one, and I do wonder what you make of county and city officials being paid more for the trade-off of you don't get to have another job. You don't get to have another part-time or full-time job. This is your job is public service, and that's what you're going to do. I wonder what you make of those rules, or the scholars that you talk to, the experts that you talk to, what they make of those kinds of rules.
We certainly had people mention that to us. We had people mention the idea that if you raised pay high enough that you can make this a full-time job and you can make this something that people commit full-time to. The average salary, I believe, for Metro Detroit is below $82,000. And so the idea that this is a part-time job, but this person is receiving $82,000, which is roughly in line with what state lawmakers make as full-time officials, is interesting. The idea that you can suggest that that's a part-time role. So that, of course, begs the question, well, then what would
This
be
isn't
enough?
the case of Commissioner Woodward, who's making that much money. Yeah,
That's exactly right. So if the idea is state lawmakers earn roughly the same amount as this part-time county commissioner, how much money would be enough for a politician, a local elected leader, to feel that they wouldn't have to do this? Now, I understand that there could be a trade-off where code or law or policy says you can't have that second job, and that's something that's been brought up. Like I said, Michigan state lawmakers are full-time. Most legislatures across the country have part-time lawmakers, and so there's a long-standing debate about whether or not that is a more effective mechanism for governance and for kind of assuaging some of these transparency concerns. I do think that where Michigan falls behind at the local level and at the state level, many other states, is that transparency concept. The Michigan legislature didn't enact some transparency mechanisms until voters forced them to in recent years by approving measures that required more financial disclosure from state lawmakers. And that's kind of the model that they're trying to emulate at the Oakland County level to try to get these disclosures in place. But I think almost all the experts talked to us and said any sort of mechanism can be exploited. Any sort of system will include loopholes, and it ultimately comes down to the people who are involved and whether or not people are watching.
In reading your reporting on that note of people watching or not watching, in the 1980s, the 1990s, the 1970s, what have you, I wonder how much this would have happened in quite the same way. And my question there is essentially about reporting and local journalism. There's a lot fewer of us, and there's a lot fewer people covering county government and city government. And I wonder what you make of that as sort of a contributor to things like this, if you think that not having as much local reporting makes ethical violations like the ones we're seeing here in Oakland County more likely.
As, of course, a strong supporter of local journalism, I absolutely believe that the dwindling number of publications and reporters who are doggedly covering municipalities has a massive impact on those communities. I mean, just recently, a paper in Royal Oak closed, right? And so in theory, in years past, that would be something that would be, that newspaper could doggedly cover. And I'll say this too, our paper and lots of other papers in the past have doggedly covered many different communities with lots and lots of people and are currently faced with the economic realities and many other challenges and constraints of media today, and are not doing what perhaps we've done in the past while still trying to do as much as we can. Yeah. So sure, I absolutely do think that there is a watchdog role here that the media can play that is perhaps not happening to the same degree as it was before. That being said, I will say that there are new tools in place that help ensure ethical conduct or potentially find misconduct that weren't in place before. So almost many meetings have live streams, or there is a public either audio recording or video recording of those meetings. Oakland County Commission records all of its meetings. You can go watch whatever they're doing. Oakland County has a rather robust document system where you can look up documents that show what they're voting on, what they're not voting on, how somebody voted. All of that is very useful. It's very useful for accountability. And we use those same measures when we're looking for accountability for other lawmakers. When we did our reporting on Judge Kenneth King in Detroit and allegations of ethical violations, we relied on some of those measures, and the same thing for state lawmakers. And so there are tools in place that help us, but absolutely, part of this story is unfortunately the idea that there perhaps might not be the same level of local dogged journalism as there was before.
Dave Boucher, thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Detroit Free Press investigative reporter Dave Boucher. He was speaking with producer Sam Corey. It's the Metro on WDET. Coming up, Ken Burns has a new docuseries coming out this weekend on PBS. WDET's Quinn Kleinfelter caught up with Burns on a recent visit to Detroit. Their conversation about the American Revolution and lessons for today after the break. This is The Metro. Stay with us.